Right now, on to the point. A shakeup in federal immigration enforcement in Minnesota after a deadly shooting, as the White House and state leaders point fingers.
A California Democratic lawmaker is introducing legislation in response to the ongoing immigration operations. Hear how it will work and a response from the Republicans.
We're fighting for fair wages.
Kaiser nurses and healthcare workers walk off the job. What both sides are saying tonight.
Cars are more expensive today than they were in years past.
And from electric vehicles to tariffs, what's driving up prices and where buyers can still find a deal.
It was absolutely devastating to watch someone be executed.
I think I also really want immigrants to see that there's more love towards them than there is hate.
Some strong reactions continuing across Minnesota and also across the nation after the death of Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse who was shot by a Border Patrol agent just over the weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Alex Bell. President Donald Trump and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz are talking while the nation's border czar is making his way to Minnesota due to the growing crisis over immigration enforcement tactics. ABC's Karen Travers has more from the White House tonight.
Today, a major change in the Trump administration's operations in Minnesota in the wake of the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy. President Trump sending his border czar Tom Homan to oversee immigration enforcement in the state, saying Homan will, quote, report directly to me.
Mr. Homan is the point person for cooperating with state and local authorities and corresponding with them, again, to achieve this level of cooperation to subdue the chaos on the streets of Minneapolis.
Border Patrol Commander-at-Large Greg Bovino is expected to leave Minneapolis tomorrow, according to multiple sources. The White House today distancing itself from comments Saturday by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and senior advisor Stephen Miller, who accused Preddy of domestic terrorism.
I have not heard the president characterize Mr. Preddy in that way.
But Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also pointing the finger at Minnesota's Democratic leaders.
This tragedy occurred as a result of a deliberate and hostile resistance by Democrat leaders in Minnesota.
Earlier Monday, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called President Trump to talk about how the two can work together to find a solution to the unrest over ICE operations. The president posting on social media that he and Walz seem to be on a, quote, similar wavelength. A spokesperson for Walz saying the president agreed to, quote, look into reducing the number of federal agents in Minnesota. Walz called the conversation productive, but in a new Wall Street Journal op-ed writes, I have repeatedly appealed to President Trump to lower the temperature, but he refuses. State and local officials say weeks of protests have had a negative impact on police officers who are spread thin and exhausted.
Well, I'm hopeful that folks can get together, that cooler heads will prevail, and that we can figure this thing out. Because regardless, the current situation is not sustainable.
Democrats are now vowing to oppose a package that includes funding for the Department of Homeland Security and 5 other departments. If they do not vote for passage, it could mean a partial government shutdown at the end of the week. Karen Travers, ABC News, the White House.
And some new information tonight on the shooting death of Renee Good. Her death is now ruled a homicide. Good was shot and killed on January 7th in Minneapolis. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner stated the cause of her death was multiple gunshot wounds that occurred as the deceased was shot by a law enforcement officer. Now, in a movement of solidarity with Minnesota, California's Democratic senators and assembly members gathered today to call for the resignation of Kristi Noem and for more accountability by Congress. ABC 10 State Matters political reporter Jenny Hubb was there, and she has the details for us.
I normally pack my license, but now lately I've had to pack my passport just to prove my citizenship in the event that I get stopped because I'm brown.
Monday morning, a crowded stage of California's Democratic legislators reaffirming the state's stand against the Trump administration over federal immigration enforcement.
Step up, speak out, and take action and lead in a moment in time where the federal government is taking us to one of our darkest points in history.
Deporting violent criminals has been done before under both Republican and Democratic administrations. It's been done. And it has been done without chaos.
Legislators indirectly referencing SB 54, the California Values Act, California's so-called sanctuary law, which limits local and state law enforcement from assisting with federal immigration efforts.
Our state and local law enforcement do not participate in these raids.
And committing to additional legislation to bring additional state-level protections.
That is not public safety. That is public failure. Kristi Noem, if she has integrity, she must resign.
That's right.
State legislators also hardening pressure on federal electeds to oppose a package of federal funding bills, one of which includes additional funding for the Department of Homeland Security.
Don't vote to give him any more of our money.
To move Congress to do their job. And if that means shutting down the federal government, then so be it. Shut it down.
Both California Senators Adam Schiff and Alex Padilla have said they would vote no. Governor Newsom, too, has decried new funding and is calling on Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem to resign and Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino to be fired.
Instead of making us safer, ICE agents are endangering our communities.
All this as President Trump calls out Democrat-run sanctuary cities and states for refusing to cooperate with ICE.
You should be shocked to no one that Donald Trump is enforcing federal immigration laws. Let's stop these nonsense of sanctuary city, sanctuary state laws, and let's work in conjunction with the federal government, just like President Obama did, just like President Clinton did.
Jenny Huh, ABC 10.
Senate Bill 747 is set to be heard on the Senate floor. The ICE mask ban is still awaiting a ruling. Now, as the immigration operations continue, one California Democratic lawmaker is now introducing two bills in response. The hope is that it will stop and prevent violence from continuing. I want to bring in ABC 10's Jeannie Nguyen, who is here with more details on the two bills and also how Republicans are responding. Right, Jeannie?
Yes, Alex. Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel says California must use its power to protect the immigrant community that's in the state. And that is why he's introducing two bills in which he says will push back on federal overreach. Republican Assemblymember Heath Flora tells me it's time for everyone to bring down the temperature.
Just days after another Minnesota resident was killed, California Democratic Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel announced he will be introducing two bills to protect residents and their constitutional rights. One of those bills will prevent federal agents from using state resources.
That means they can't use state parking lots to stage for raids. It means that they can't force us to be complicit in their actions, which are inciting chaos, which are inciting violence, which are terrorizing our communities.
In response, Republican Assemblymember Heath Flora says this could be problematic.
Anything that we prohibit law enforcement from communicating with each other, I think is a problem. So I think allowing them to use state property, I think we need to do that. So I would not be very supportive of that.
Legislative analyst Chris McCaley says it could bring some challenges in court.
That's likely to withstand a court challenge because the state should be able to determine who can and cannot use their facilities. And I think that federal agents could in fact be prohibited from conducting any sort of ICE operations on state-owned property.
In addition to that bill, Gabriel says he'll be introducing another bill that would require an independent state investigation in the event of a shooting by federal immigration agents.
Almost immediately after this horrific killing that we just had in Minnesota, that the administration started to make excuses. They started to use words like domestic terrorists. They started to invent justifications for that. So we can't trust DHS to conduct an investigation of these killings.
Gabriel acknowledges the challenges in enforcing state rules onto the federal government, but he says it's time to stand up to the Trump administration.
Make sure that they are not using California resources, state taxpayer dollars, state resources to advance that agenda, because it is an agenda that we fiercely reject.
Calling for everyone to lower the temperature, Flora says he agrees with having state investigators involved in any federal investigation and believes it would be helpful.
The more eyes we have on investigation, investigations are exactly that. They're an investigation to figure out the truth, and I think that's important. So on the surface level, it doesn't bother me.
Assemblymember Gabriel has not yet formally introduced these bills, but he says he will do it soon, Alex.
All right, Jeannie, thank you. Tonight, we are also hearing from Sacramento Mayor Kevin McCarty, who says that he supports the new legislation.
So this is really would be in place, God forbids, if there is an incident in California. I think it's a smart policy, and so I applaud Assemblymember Gabriel and the legislature for taking a look at this idea.
All right, on the other side of the break, a deadly winter storm gripping the Northeast, leaving thousands in the cold. We'll show you the impact across the region. And then we're heading out to Kaiser, where nurses and healthcare workers are on strike, what they're demanding and what patients need to know.
And we've got more dense fog tonight and in tomorrow morning. The one thing that'll be a little different, we've got a chance for some showers later on tomorrow. I've got a full look at the forecast and that shower chance coming up after the break.
But first, and other headlines tonight, the San Joaquin County District Attorney's Office announced today that it will seek the death penalty in the case against accused Stockton serial killer Wesley Brownlee. The defense said that they plan to challenge the validity of the grand jury indictment, which included 6 charges of murder and 1 charge of attempted murder. It was handed down in November while proceedings were still suspended as the court determined Brownlee's competency to stand trial. A private business jet carrying 6 people crashed in Maine. There were no survivors. Officials at Bangor International Airport say the jet flipped over and burned while taking off in the snow last night. The jet crashed as the nation's massive winter storm was beginning to blow into the area. And a win for transgender patients this week. The U.S. Department of Justice agreed to end its efforts to obtain personal and medical information for more than 3,000 young patients at Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. The Justice Department sent subpoenas to more than 20 medical providers that offer gender-affirming care for minors, saying it was investigating healthcare fraud. 7 families sued in November to stop the subpoena.
Many people living in the U.S. are facing another night of below freezing temperatures and no electricity after a massive winter storm dumped more snow in the Northeast. We know that at least 30 people have died due to just this storm. The Northeast is buried in inches of snow, more than a foot in some areas. Boston saw more than 18 inches. Out in Philadelphia, there's so much piled up that they're using backhoes to pick up the snow and dump it into melting machines. New York City seeing nearly a foot of snow. The brutal cold is still lingering with wind chills in the single digits in parts of the Northeast. Now, as much of the United States faces ice and heavy snow from enormous winter storm, President Donald Trump used social media to dispute that the world is warming. So in a post on his Truth Social account, the president on Friday questioned how the world can be warming when it is so cold and called the temperatures nearly unprecedented. He also called advocates and scientists environmental insurrectionists. More than a dozen scientists Friday told the Associated Press the president's claims were wrong. So President Trump asked whatever happened to global warming. We do want to give you some facts here. According to a Princeton University climate scientist, global warming is not going anywhere. The last 3 years have been the warmest on record, increasing at a significantly faster rate than they had been, according to that data. And I do want to get things over to Brendan because you have something else to add on to this, right?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is these Arctic outbreaks may end up becoming more common as we continue to see climate change. Remember, it's not just global warming, it's climate change. And the first thing we have to understand is weather is not climate. So the day-to-day temperature fluctuations, the snowstorms, these Arctic outbreaks, that's not climate, that's weather. Climate is the trend from months to years, even decades. And that means cold days like what we've had this week can absolutely still happen. The second thing is the Arctic is warming fastest. That weakens the polar jet, which helps to keep all of that very cold Arctic air up in the Arctic. These polar jets are driven by the temperature difference between the equator and the poles. And because the poles are warming the fastest, again, that is weakening that polar jet. So could this mean an increase in these cold snaps and Arctic outbreaks? Well, more science is needed. In theory, it could absolutely mean that. But again, you have to remember, climate change is not just about warming. So here's a quick example of the polar vortex, right, which is higher up in the atmosphere, but essentially it's contained by the polar jet stream. But as that jet stream weakens, it starts to slacken a little bit in some places. And so that can allow that Arctic air to move into places that don't always see it. So that's why as that Arctic jet, that polar jet weakens more and more as the globe continues to warm, we could end up having even more cold air outbreaks across the U.S. But again, more science there is needed. Let's talk a little bit about the weather here in Northern California. We're 50 right now in Sacramento, 46 in Stockton, 51 in Modesto, 50 Placerville, 30s in the high country. But we're looking at another night and morning with some dense fog. We got a dense fog advisory until 11 a.m. in the morning. Tuesday morning starts off in those middle 30s with that fog. Tuesday afternoon, clouds and then late p.m. showers. So we're back in your seasonal. Tomorrow afternoon, you see the clouds coming in. And as we get towards the later afternoon and evening hours, there comes that round of very light rain. We are not talking about much rain at all, less than 1/10 of an inch expected in the valley and a couple of inches of snow in the high country. But this pattern continues to be dominated by high pressure. So even as we go through the rest of this week and the start of February, no big storms on the horizon, Alex.
All right, Brendan, thank you. Right after the break, we are looking into the cost of buying a new car. Shoppers are experiencing a lot of sticker shock when they hit the lots. Tonight, a look at what is driving the increase and also where you can still find a bargain. Michigan. And then President Trump wants to cap credit card interest rates as Americans carry record levels of debt, what it could mean for your wallet. Welcome back in. Tens of thousands of Kaiser Permanente nurses and healthcare workers went on strike today at hundreds of clinics across California and Hawaii. The union representing employees saying that they're striking over unfair labor practices. But Kaiser says it's about wages. Kaiser and the union say that they've been bargaining for months, trying to reach an agreement on a new set of contracts. Those talks are set to resume, but an open-ended strike across various locations, including Roseville, still began this morning. This is video from this morning. The crowd's voicing their message, hoping to reach an agreement for both sides.
We're fighting for fair wages for our employees. We are looking to have benefits for our new affiliates. We're all standing together as one.
And that was speech language pathologist Kurt Hankins. He's one of the 100 striking at Kaiser's Roseville Medical Center, calling for change. Wages are just one of the several key points that they are fighting for. In a statement released on Sunday, Kaiser says, in part, quote, "This open-ended strike by UNAC/UHCP is unnecessary when such a generous offer is on the table. The strike is designed to disrupt the lives of our patients, the very people we are all here to serve." Now, Kaiser says their hospitals and nearly all of their medical offices will remain open. However, in some cases, they've had to reschedule certain appointments for a shift or virtual care. Kaiser says that they will contact members in advance if your care is affected, so make sure you look out for that. All right, let's jump into your price points tonight. President Donald Trump is pushing a 10% cap on credit card rates. It is his attempt to curb affordability concerns that have been floating around out there.
I'm asking Congress to cap credit card interest rates at 10% for 1 year.
Right now, American households are facing the most credit card debt on record going back to 1999. According to data from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, outstanding credit card balances hit more than $1.2 trillion in the third quarter of 2025. Yet the banking industry says the president's proposal would make things worse.
Banks might really pull back access to credit, especially for consumers with lower credit scores. They do not want to take on the risk.
When consumers lose access to credit, which is anticipated if this rate cut goes in, they often reduce their spending on essentials like healthcare, education, food, and are more likely to fall behind on bills.
And right now, on average, interest rates on credit cards is just under 20%, though according to Bankrate, some rates are much higher. I know some friends have told me that those rates are much higher than what they're seeing. All right, if you were in the market for a new car this year, get ready for some sticker shock. New car prices are at a record high, and auto experts say that buyers have less negotiating power. Reporter Jen Sullivan explains what is driving up the cost and also how you can find a good deal.
Americans are paying more than ever for cars, and those higher prices are fueled by a variety of factors, including fewer cheaper models and tariffs.
Cars are more expensive today than they were in years past.
Brian Moody works at Kelley Blue Book. Their data shows buyers paid an average of more than $50,000 for a new car last month. That's a record high. Average prices for an electric vehicle are even higher, more than $58,000. And the EV market has taken a hit. The $7,500 federal tax credit expired last October. Moody says he does think the EV market will bounce back. But then there's tariffs.
The cars that incur the highest tariff are the ones that arrive on our shores completely assembled.
Kelley Blue Book estimates tariffs can increase car prices by as much as $6,000 for cars under $40,000. Moody says automakers are going to spread those costs across their different models.
A person buying a $90,000 pickup can withstand a $3,000 price increase. A person buying a $25,000 compact sedan cannot withstand that much of a price increase.
Moody is more concerned about repair costs going up as tariffs drive up the price of parts. But it's not all bad news.
There are still many good deals to be found.
While you may not have much room to negotiate the price, Moody suggests negotiating things like free oil changes, car washes, ask for extra services to be included. The other good news is interest rates are coming down, which will mean lower monthly car payments.
What's streaming after the show? And a quick note before we go. Right now on the ABC 10 app, we do have continuing coverage from Minneapolis, including the backlash after the latest shooting by federal agents. There is also more on who Alex Preddy was. He was the ICU nurse who was killed by federal agents just this past weekend. As always, thank you so much for watching, for always inviting us into your home. If you have something that you think the team and I should be looking into, you can always email us at tothepoint@abc10.com. Have a great night, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.